wow, if you're someone who has already watched the first 4 videos of this series, thank you so much. They're kind of a series, and when I started making this channel, this was just gonna be a 4-part series, like a 4-part class for me to give people for free, but the amount of downloads and messages that I got on Spotify and Apple led me to decide that I'm actually just going to add more and more and more episodes. So I've added a lot more. I have a ton to say about anxious attachment style and becoming more secure. And what better place to put it than here on YouTube, where you can watch it at your leisure. What I've also done is I've created a membership space. This is community, course, also coaching. And what I realized is that a YouTube channel and a podcast is such a one-way channel. I can get a little bit of feedback here and there, but it's so much more nourishing for you and me to be together in real time, to be speaking to each other, to be able to talk about the real things that are actually coming up for you, and for you to have accountability and a space to practice somatic work and be guided and share and heal and be with like-minded women who are actually on the same journey. I know it can feel very isolating to look at this stuff. From my end, there's just so many women having the same experience that I talk to all the time. And I want to be like, girls, don't worry, this is common. But when you're going through it alone and feeling like you're the only one that maybe knows, or that your situation feels very unique, or you don't want to bring it up, it can feel like a lonely journey. But the truth about anxious attachment is it actually cannot be healed alone. We cannot just heal it in our mind. We can't heal it in isolation, because none of these wounds happened in isolation. So we have to be in relation to someone else. We have to be witnessed by other women in the healing, or with a healer or a therapist or a coach. And then ultimately the last pieces will heal in romantic relationship. So the membership is something that I'm wholeheartedly inviting you to check out. I've made it really accessible for everyone that's committed to deepening their inner healing and inner growth journey, while also offering this accountability and investment in yourself to show up for this. So I would love, love, love to meet you inside. And so I wanted to kick off the expanding of these episodes by talking about how I moved from anxious to secure. And the reason that I got this idea is I was watching TikTok, as one does, and I saw this man talking about how he moved from anxious to secure. And I realized, wow, his list is actually really different than what I did. And so clearly there's different paths for getting there depending on where you're at and who you are and how your unique nervous system is reacting in these instances. But I trust between the 5 different things that I'm going to share with you today, one of them will definitely stand out to you, if not multiple, to help you envision how you can start to cultivate what you need in order to move from the anxious attachment behaviors and tendencies towards being more secure. So the first thing that I had to do, and actually this is in no particular order, it kind of all happened simultaneously at the same time, but one thing that I had to do was develop self-compassion. I was someone who was fiercely independent, overworking, completely burning myself out, on top of people pleasing and having poor boundaries, and it was just a mess. And when I looked deeper at that, it was because I was not gentle on myself. I could be gentle and patient and caring with other people, but when it came to the standards that I had for myself, the mental talk that I had towards myself, and just the amount that I would put on my plate as far as my schedule goes, and the pressure that I put on myself was incredibly high. So what I had to develop was self-compassion. And in one way, that might sound obvious or easy because you probably already know how to be compassionate to other people in some circumstances. So why is it so hard to turn it inward on ourselves? And what I had to really look at was the reasons that I thought that it wasn't okay, and the beliefs that I had that were stopping me from being able to slow down, from stopping me from being able to be gentle with myself. And this came through many somatic therapy practices, internal family systems, aka parts work sessions, also inner child sessions. And the reason that inner child sessions tend to be so potent is because when we are seeing ourselves as a child, we really see the innocence that a child has. And so it's easier to start to cultivate that patience and compassion. What we tend to also do is talk to ourselves as our parents would talk to us. And this came through on a somatic therapy session that I was facilitating yesterday with a one-on-one client. She was telling me how when her anxious or overwhelmed or negative thoughts come up, she would say, nope, that's not true. That's not true. We need to stop thinking that, which can be seen as effective because you're kind of interrupting the pattern by realizing the thoughts aren't always true. But if you imagine speaking with that tone to a child, they're going to perceive that in one of two ways. One being they're going to start questioning their reality because they believe this is true. So if the adult says, no, that's not true, stop thinking that, it's very confusing for the child. And when the child loses their own sense of self-trust, now they start to rely on the adult to decide what's true and what's not true. And when they lean towards that sort of outsourcing or for validation or direction, that is going to manifest further into this anxious attachment style, which looks outward in order to get the answers or affirm that we're good enough and affirm who we are. Another child might get more mad. So they might have a little more fire, a little more energy and fierceness and a fight response, where if the adult said, that's not true, stop thinking that, they may get even louder with the thought, with the idea. So this is going to manifest in your adult mind as the thoughts being more intense and seemingly this relentless loop, even though you know they're not true. In either case, speaking in this tone of that's not true, we're not thinking that, that's bad, is actually likely not going to be effective or not as effective as if we change the tone to speak to ourselves with compassion and gentleness and saying, hey, I understand this feels very intense, but I want you to remember, or let's question together, is this true? Is it true that the person is mad at you? Do we know for sure? You know, that sort of patience and presence, giving that to yourself is going to create a space for the intensity to dissipate. You can imagine if you're talking to someone or a child like this, even an adult, you're going to get more of a, okay, maybe it's not true. And when you can admit that yourself, that it's not true, instead of saying, this is not true, shut up, stop thinking that, it's going to land much deeper and be much easier to let that spiral kind of drop. So this is just an example of what self-compassion looks like and how you can keep an eye on it and what might get in the way. Once you can speak to yourself with more self-compassion, then you also start to trust yourself more. That's what real self-love is. And of course, those qualities are going to lead you to feel more secure within yourself, which is going to translate into your relationship dynamics. Second thing is I had to get really clear on my boundaries and needs. And I did that by reflecting on what didn't work for me in past relationships and what really didn't feel good. So one thing that I hear a lot from my clients is that something that doesn't feel good when we have an anxious attachment style would be dating people who don't like to use their phone, or say they're not good texters, or just not valuing consistent communication. To me, as an anxious attachment person, sometimes I want to say that's bullshit. Like, how are you not looking at your phone? Everyone's looking at their phone. And at the same time, if that's their truth and that's how they're going to behave and that's the action I'm going to receive, then I have to know that that action doesn't work for me. So a need for me is to be in consistent communication, which may be in, very early days, every few days. But if I'm actually dating someone, then of course I would expect to talk to them every day. And that's my need, and that's okay. But it's something that I had to own and also communicate. Getting clear on all your boundaries and all your needs can be a process, and it is a process of self-discovery and really slowing down and looking at where boundaries and needs actually affect your life as a whole. We can look at emotional needs and time boundaries and physical boundaries and physical needs and space needs, and there's so many different categories of this. So that's why what I'm sharing is that the first thing to do is usually to look at what didn't work or what doesn't work. A third thing that I did to move from anxious to secure is taking responsibility for the shadows of the anxious attachment style. So often the anxious attachment style is seen as sort of like the soft lover, maybe the one that's in the victim, because avoidant is pulling away and ghosting. But at the same time, as someone with anxious attachment tendencies, what was really beneficial for me was seeing where those were not only harming me, the tendencies, but also the people that I was interacting with. So as an example, by over-functioning, over-giving, over-showing up, over everything, I was setting a standard that I probably wasn't going to be able to uphold. So I was training the people that I was relating to, especially the people that I was dating, that I didn't need anything, that I could take care of myself, that I'd be there when they needed, that I wouldn't be there if they didn't need it. I would listen so intently to everything that they said so that they were made to feel so extra special. Meanwhile, the reason that I was doing that was so that I could get their validation. So with this over-functioning, I'm training them to expect a certain level from me of capacity that I probably didn't have, and I definitely would not have given to other people in my life. And there comes a point where I can't uphold that anymore because I'm tired, or I have a lot of work or hormonal dip, and then they are going to feel confused or disappointed or upset, or my attempt to continue to overfunction that way is going to turn into frustration and resentment for me when I'm not getting that same level of presence or care, whatever I think I'm doing back in my direction. Another shadow of the anxious attachment is desire for control. And this shows up in predicting or trying to predict the future. So when we daydream about a life with this person that we started dating and we're planning the wedding in our head or planning a date that doesn't actually have any confirmation, what we're doing is we're trying to control the future and trying to protect ourselves by predicting something that we want. We can also do this by deciding what type of person that they are and projecting this idea onto them, fantasizing who they are in order to try and protect ourselves from getting hurt. So it's this whole game that's kind of playing out in our minds through our imagination that feels and fuels a sense of comfort and a sense of soothing. Because if we can decide that they are going to act and show up a certain way and imagine it, we start to feel more safe to basically just exist. It's this kind of delusional self-soothing thing, and what often happens, as I'm sure you've experienced, is it backfires because we create these expectations that inevitably basically don't happen. Another way that control can show up when we're dating someone, especially if you're a woman who identifies as being pretty independent and able to handle things yourself, then control is going to show up in ways like questioning your partner or little passive-aggressive criticism, maybe outward criticism, and sort of this belief that because you would have done it different, you would have done it better. And if you are a woman relating to a man, that is not going to feel good for his masculinity. And this is something that I've had to work really hard to turn the dial down on. When I got into my current relationship, I thought I had done such a good job. And now I see the sneaky ways that it shows up, and how it translates for him is that I'm doubting him, that I don't trust his capability, and I know that's not true. But sometimes it's still so hard for me to let go of these little details and let it happen and trust that even if it's different than I would do it, it's still going to be okay. And that desire for control, as we know, is one of these anxious tendencies. It's a shadow of it. So working with that has been a big lesson and an ongoing lesson for me, for sure. The last shadow that I want to mention is codependency. So this is usually the experience where the person that you are relating to and their level of happiness dictates your level of happiness. So if they feel off, you feel off. If they're upset, you're upset. Even if it's not about you, but if they're upset and you don't know what it's about, you're going to feel like it's about you. And you're going to feel like you need to fix it, solve it immediately. And it can be really all-encompassing of your day and of your energy. And this outsourcing of your own autonomy of feelings and power is so incredibly draining. And I was doing this in a number of ways where I would feel a lot of urgency to resolve conflict immediately if anything came up. Like, I'll come to your house now, we need to have this conversation now, let's talk about it now, I'll call you now. And that sort of conflict management doesn't always work. It usually means that the energy is really heightened and some people just need space. So I had to learn how to respect people's boundaries in that sense and not be so urgent to have conversations all the time and talk about all the time. When you are in a safe, secure, and trusting relationship, of course you can talk about things, but it doesn't have to be right now. And it doesn't feel like it has to be right now because you have this foundation of certainty that they're still going to be there tomorrow. They're still going to be there in a week. They are willing to work it out with you. Okay, the fourth thing I did when becoming secure is slowing down when dating. This is in order to avoid pedestaling someone or kind of like losing myself in the excitement of early dating. And what I needed to do was make sure that I had actual consistent evidence for the character traits that I was daydreaming about. Because I would meet someone and I'd be like, oh my God, he's so nice, he's this, he's that, da da da. And after one date, can you really know that? Can you really have enough evidence to really know someone? No, of course not, right? And honestly, on a first date, half the people are like too nervous to be who they really are, and the other half are going to be on their like absolute best behavior with their shiniest mask on, honestly, in order to be received well, as I would probably do as well. So for anxious attachers, it's really important to slow down so that we're able to see reality for what it is instead of trying to force our reality into some fantasy that we've created about the future. Something that's often recommended if you see this as one of your core behaviors, like if you find yourself as someone who tends to like really lock on to people and become a little codependent with them and pedestal them, is to actually date multiple people at a time in the beginning, you know, until you can really suss out and trust who you want to move forward with. And even when maybe part of you feels like on the first date, like, oh, this is it, this is actually it, these other guys, I'm just gonna, you know, it's done. If you were to slow down and just let things move and flow as they are until there is a bit more of a natural, safe landing with someone that you're feeling secure with, that you have actual evidence in that they're gonna show up and take care and meet your needs and communicate with you, until you can land safely with someone that you feel secure with, until you have enough evidence that they are going to take care and meet your needs and communicate with you and show up consistently. So this is just keeping your options open just a little bit so that all of your focus doesn't just lock onto someone that you are going to project all these needs and expectations onto, which is usually something that leads to disappointment. And number 5 is that I had to stop dating the people who triggered the fuck out of me. So by the time I got to this point in my attachment journey, I could very easily pick up whether someone was going to be emotionally unavailable, non-committal, and avoidant. And on one hand, that still felt good to me. It still felt compelling because that's what I was used to. But I knew that the path was going to be so painful that I had to walk away from it before it even started, or as soon as possible, because I knew it was going to get worse. I knew that the truth for those type of people in that place in their life is that they are not able to give me what they want. They're not ready for a committed relationship, which is what I wanted. And by continuing to walk the path and date someone who is avoidant at that level was only actually self-harm. And I had to correct that path. Now, I will say that in the beginning, dating more secure people was also really uncomfortable because it wasn't fulfilling my belief that love is inconsistent. It wasn't making me feel like I had to be hypervigilant and constantly working to prove my worth. I was getting validated, I was getting consistency, I was getting safety, and this was a bit of a shock to my system. It made me want to literally curl up in a ball and hide in the corner, and I felt scared because I thought, this person, they're gonna see me. If I can't hide behind overfunctioning and overgiving and people pleasing, they're gonna see me, and that's scary. So I had to ease into this. I had to regulate my nervous system along the way to receive. I had to feel my toes curl when he would give me gifts or plan dates or do really thoughtful things. And it was this contrast of like, oh my God, is this really happening for me? Can I really receive this? Am I gonna owe him something? And also the part of me that was like, oh, this is so nice. I feel excited. I feel taken care of. I feel like I can lean into this. And with more practice and presence and slowness, I was able to expand my ability to show up truthfully and authentically and vulnerably and show up to the level of giving that I actually had, which was in alignment with my own boundaries. And every time you have one of these experiences where you try it a little different and you receive the positive feedback, that's going to expand your capacity to be able to change your behavior. So, as an example, asking for a need, right? We can go back to the communication example. In the past, if I would think about asking someone that I was dating to be more consistent in their communication, I wouldn't do it. I would feel like I was being too needy, too demanding, that I had to wait longer to ask for that I had to be his girlfriend before I could ask for that. I never would have asked because the fear of the pain of being rejected was just way too much. But when I started dating more secure people and I slowed down and related to them and could really feel their integrity and feel their consistency and feel their trust with tons of real evidence, that created a more safe environment for me to start to ask for other needs. Sometimes it will actually be a non-issue because these types of people are going to communicate, for example. It's who they are. They are going to be clear. So in that case, we can just appreciate, wow, okay, I feel so grateful when I get a good morning text from you every day, or I love how you make the plans. We just get to acknowledge what's happening, and that is also going to help you receive it on a more deep level. So, quick recap on 5 of the things I had to focus on in order to move from anxious to secure. Number 1 was developing a deep sense of self-compassion, which is real self-love. Number 2, getting clear on my boundaries and needs. 3, taking responsibility for some of those shadows of the anxious attachment. 4, slowing down. And 5, not dating people who were really going to trigger my anxious attachment style. So I hope this was helpful to hear these examples and these stories. If you want more of this, definitely click that subscribe button below and leave a comment. I would so love to hear from you.